Hallo, hallo Kinder, hallo Klasse, guten Morgen und guten Tag. Ich bin Herr Weaver und der Song ist von Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich, ja, eine sehr bekannte, populäre Sängerin aus Berlin. Sie kommt aus Berlin. And we're going to be talking about the city of Berlin today. And Marlene Dietrich is one of the more famous people from that particular city. And that city is the capital. And we'll be talking about that and some other things. There are a few vocabulary things I'd like to go over. Let's look here and see a few words that we need to know just to get through kind of this little bit here. This word here, die Hauptstadt. Die Hauptstadt. So, Oklahoma City ist die Hauptstadt von Oklahoma. Und Berlin ist die Hauptstadt von Deutschland. Und das ist and then this next word, you already know it, Berlin. It's just pronounced differently. They say it like the word bear, and then lean, Berlin. Berlin. We say Berlin, and they just say it with a little more different vowel pronunciation. We'll talk about that later this week. And then this word here, an important word in Berlin history, and that is die Mauer. Die Mauer, or die Berliner Mauer. A Mauer is a wall, not like this kind of wall, but an outdoor wall. So it would be used to go around a backyard or to protect, to block the highway off from someone's property. That's a Mauer. In this case, the Berlin Wall is used quite a bit differently. And the fourth word we're going to learn, the last one, is this one, der Reichstag. Der Reichstag is what we call is the Capitol building in Berlin. And it still stands. It was built in the 1800s, and it still stands today and is used today as the Capitol. So that's the name of the building, der Reichstag. So let's jump into this PowerPoint. I'm going to try to do this. I had some problems getting this started here recently. I'm going to try to share my screen like I normally do. And that's worked just fine up till now. We'll see if the camera stays on with me here. Okay. Good. We're still going. And if I pull this up, then is that going to stay? Okay, I'm going to leave that little. Seems like if I X this out here, it's been leaving me. So let's just leave it up for now, and hopefully it'll keep working. This is the PowerPoint of Berlin, eine moderne Geschichte, modern history. And what you see here is the Brandenburger Tor, or the Brandenburg Gate. And it actually is or was a gate that was in the old city wall that went around the city of Berlin. There are other gates, although they talk about them in certain areas, but the gates themselves don't stand any longer. But this gate has remained standing and is really an icon of the city, would be part of their skyline or part of their logo, if they had a logo. Something really iconic for the city. After World War II, this is the summer of 1945, early summer, you can see that Berlin is really completely destroyed. There's not you can see this is a neighborhood down here, and you can see that the neighborhood is really, there's not really any buildings that are completely intact there. This is the Reichstag I mentioned a minute ago, that vocabulary word. The Reichstag is still standing, though. It's still standing in this picture and still standing today, although it's in pretty bad shape. And I'll say more about that in a minute. Here's just a neighborhood here, and you can see it's just piles of rubble. And so the British, American, and Soviet Union bombed the city of Berlin pretty heavily throughout the as well, especially later in the war they did. These are 4 different angles, I guess, of the Reichstag. And so you see that you've got this, what looks to be the shape of a dome of some sort on top, and you can see it here, and a tiny bit of it right there. And this used to be a glass dome that went over the Reichstag. And of course, when the bombs began falling, This is the first thing that goes out, gets blown out, is um, the glass dome of the Capitol. The framework was still standing there, but that got shattered a long time ago. These pictures are all taken after the war. And you can see here, there's a river that runs here, and it runs right alongside the Capitol, and then it actually takes a sharp right turn and runs right behind the Capitol building. Literally just cuts right behind it. Of course, the river was there before the Reichstag, and so the Reichstag was built right on that corner of the Spree River. That's spelled Spree, Spree, pronounced like an A sound. Talk about that again later this week. And Spree is an important. In fact, the song I was playing as we came in by Marlene Dietrich is singing about this river. It's an important river to people in Berlin. And you can see here, these kids are a lot like any other kids, especially like what we've got now, this kind of stay-at-home order. And you can see here, these kids, they've been in a bomb shelter or in and out of bomb shelters for the last several months, and they just want to get outside and play. And so the war's over, and they're going to go swimming. And it's summertime, so they're going to go swimming. And they're just going to swim right here in the river. It's not really a fast-flowing river. It's just but it, it moves a little bit, but okay. So they're just enjoying themselves. Well, after the war, this actually was decided before the war ended to a great degree. Some of it was decided later, but they decided, the victorious powers, the Soviet Union, the US, the French, and the British, decided to split up the country the country of Germany into 4 occupation zones. So different countries were going to occupy different areas. The Soviet Union occupied a large area here in the east. The British occupied this area in the northwest. The French had this bisected area here in the southwest. And then the Americans have this all the way from the central part of Germany down to the southeastern part of the country. And that meant that these 4 countries really were in control of those areas. They cooperated with each other in the way things were done. But, some of these different, the British, the French, and the US did a very good job managing things in these areas. The Soviet Union had their own way of doing things. They were a communist country, so they were leaning a certain way economically with this sector. Now, the whole city was open after the war, after the occupied powers got things set up. You could go from the Soviet sector to the British sector and to the US sector. There was no problem moving around, at least for the first several years after the occupying powers began this in 1945. Now, they also took the city of Berlin and they divided it into 4 sections, 4 occupation zones. So the country has 4 occupation zones, and the city of Berlin has 4 occupation zones, and it's split up very similar, a little different. The Soviets here in the east part of Berlin, the US in the southern part of Berlin, southern and western part, the British in the middle western part, and the French in the northwestern part of Berlin, and they occupied. And again, with the city, like the country, you were free to go back and forth. You might have a job over here, or you might live over here and have a job in the British sector, or have a friend that lives in the US sector, but you live in the British sector. No problem. You were free to travel as you needed to get around in those 4 sectors. That lasted until 1961, as we'll see here. In 1961, the Soviet Union controlled the eastern part of Germany, decided, or I should say also the eastern part of Berlin. In this case, they decided to build a wall down the city, almost down the center of the city. So you can see that the Soviet sector was actually a pretty substantial part of the city. And they built a wall going right down this black line here, this kind of zigzag line that cuts the city in half. And right where that border is, they built this wall. And they just literally, people woke up one morning and found out that the Soviets were building a wall in the middle of the city. This is a very rudimentary wall, just made out of cinder blocks. They're going to build something more long-lasting later. But if I like to use the analogy, if you were to just wake up one morning and you found out on the news, or on the radio on your way to school that, hey, they're building a wall down 41st Street, and the whole city of Tulsa is going to be divided now. And if you have a friend in the other side of 41st Street, or a job on the other side of 41st Street, or a relative on the other side of 41st Street, yeah, it's going to be a while for, yeah, and your job, you have to find another job. And you live in the south part of, and you live in the north part of Tulsa. And so it would be unbelievable, but this is what people woke up to. And people literally are standing here stunned on the west side of Berlin, watching this wall go up as the people from the east, the Soviet sector, are building it. It was actually a big day in Western world history when this occurred. They said they were building the wall to keep the West from invading. They felt threatened, they said, but the truth is they were building the wall to keep their own people in. A lot of people were leaving the East, going to the West for better jobs, more money, better conditions, and better supply chain of food and other things. So people were leaving the East, so they built a wall to keep everybody in. That was the plan. They didn't build the wall overnight, of course. Berlin's a big city, and they had parts of the city that were, for a period of time, were guarded off by this, razor wire here coiled up. And then they put an armed guard there, an armed soldier, to guard the border. So people tried to escape. The guards are supposed to shoot them. Well, that only works as long as the guards want to stay in East Berlin. This guard is escaping. This guard turned around, and of course, he's in charge of that area. No one's watching him, and he made a run for it. And this is, of course, taken from the west side, I think from the French sector, pointed towards the east. And this East German soldier decided to make a run for it. And he is leaping over the razor wire with his rifle, and he came to the west, and he actually, the real person, survived and lived in the West the rest of his life. Of course, people just watching as they're building the wall. People here on the east side are watching from the windows of their apartment building. Nothing anyone can do on either side of the wall as it's being built slowly across the city. And as the final touches to the first part of the wall, you can see it's kind of rudimentary, really, as I said, just these cinder blocks with mortar between them. And over here you can kind of get an idea. It's didn't really require very much of a skilled bricklayer to set this thing up, but it is what it is. And here's kind of a famous part of the wall here, because there's a lot of famous photos taken there too at Bernauer Straße. And they're waving to people in the east as the last part of the wall goes up. This, if I didn't say so, I'm going to flash back and forth from modern to old a little bit. This is what exists today, and it existed when the Berlin Wall was standing. Just so you know, the Berlin Wall stood from 1961, the date I had on that one slide, all the way until 1989. So it stood for a good long time. And there is, on the west side of where the Berlin Wall stood, it's not there any longer, of course, the Berlin Wall's gone, is this kind of, it's not a state-built memorial, or this federal government didn't build it. It was built by people who decided to, every time they knew somebody tried to escape out of East Berlin, and they were either killed or maybe later executed for having tried to escape, they put a cross together for them, and they found out what their name was, found out what day they died, and then if anyone else had any information, or they could find any information about them, they would include a little information here, like in a little flyer thing. So here's this 1963, and it's kind of hard to read the dates. I don't know where it is. This actually goes pretty much further this way, and it actually picks up again over here, further down this little sidewalk. But this, there's one guy, and he's right about in here somewhere, and I always go and look at when I go there, I go and look at his little cross, because I always feel bad. He tried to escape out of East Berlin just a few months before the Berlin Wall came down, very peacefully came down. There's no way he could have known that. He decided to make a run for it, and he did, and he was killed. And unfortunately, if he could have just waited or planned a different time, but He was killed in the process, so he has a cross here too. I always go look. I always kind of feel bad for him, but all right, that's not that important. Let's see. This is what the Berlin Wall um, looked like in its final version. This, of course, is not that kind of raw cinder block with mortar. This is actually what they ended up with at the end. So you have a wall here. I believe it's about 13 feet high. Of course, they measure it in meters, and about 13 feet high. So too high for anyone to, just reach up and 13 feet. Sorry, 13 feet would be what, 4 meters, I think, total. So no one's going to just reach up and grab hold of the top and pull themselves over. But there's more reasons why that's not going to happen. This actually is what the wall would have. This is the east side of the wall, East Berlin, and over here is the west side of the wall. On the west side of the wall, you could walk right up to the wall and you could write your name on it. You could spray paint it. You could write graffiti on it. You could say Jenny loves David over. You could write whatever you want to. And in fact, I signed my name on the wall at one point, and back in the 1980s. You can walk right up to it. On the east side, you could not walk up to the wall. There was no graffiti on the east side of the wall. The reasons I'll explain just in a minute. But they put then also on top of the wall it was made out of concrete, but it was shaped in a kind of a tubular fashion, and it sat there on top of the wall and was then, cemented in to fit along the face of the wall. And this was to keep anybody, or actually kind of discourage or make it difficult for anyone to get kind of a grip on the top of the wall. If they were able to get up to the wall somehow, which really would be very difficult to do, but if they did somehow from the east trying to go to the west, and they had some way of scaling the wall, of course there was nothing to grab hold of or anything, they'd have a hard time grabbing hold of anything. Also, if someone tried to use like a hook or something, like a grappling hook or a mountain climbing hook or something, well, that's just not gonna it's not gonna be able to grab hold of it. It's gonna slip back off again because it's rounded there. So anyway, they went through a lot of phases with this. They actually would change things about the wall as other escape attempts happen. They would say, okay, well, we can't have that happen again, and they would come back and they would add something or tweak something with the wall. They had to make it keep that from happening again. Okay, now this is gonna be hard to see, but I'll tell you what this all is here. But here you have, this is the Berlin Wall over here. All right, and I don't know why they make it look like there's planks, but it's just kind of in sections, and so it goes on and on and on like this. We can see the rounded top here on top of the wall. They don't keep showing that. But before you got, this is on the east side of the wall, and before you got to the wall, which is over here, and over here where these trees are, right over here, that's West Berlin, and that might be your goal, is to get from East Berlin to West Berlin. But you've got a long way to go, because right here, these trees over here in East Berlin. Let's say you walked up close to the East Berlin, close to the border, let's say. There is an electrified fence that ran here, the length of so before you get to the wall, first thing you got to get through this electrified fence, which is not easy to do. If somehow you got through the electrified fence, you've got other problems then. You've got these spotlights here that are operated by people on the ground. You've got these, what they call pillboxes, I think. These are fortified structures where a gun can point out of any direction here. So they're going to be shot there. And then every 500 meters, half kilometer, you have a guard tower. And in the guard tower would be 2 or 3 guards at a time with a spotlight on top of the guard tower. And of course, they're armed. And if you got through the fence and you got into this area right here, you're more than likely going to be spotted by the spotlight or spotlight up here and seen by someone who has a gun either here or here, and you would be shot. A lot of people were shot trying this. I don't know what they thought they were going to do once they got through this, but that was the plan. They also had patrols with dogs, German shepherds and vicious and trained military dogs. And they were either on a line like that, or when they weren't that way, they were walking a patrol with soldiers. This area was then patrolled on foot. It was looked at from above. looked at here from these fortified boxes by spotlight users here. And they also had almost much closer than there were guard towers, where there was this lighting, this highway style of lighting. Like these are like these big lights you would see on the interstate highway, and especially when you go through a city. So this whole area at night was lit up, illuminated like daytime. And so you would have had at no time, it was either daytime or it was the evening or nighttime, and these lights came on in the evening. There was no problem with seeing if somebody was trying to get through from the east, trying to leave to the west. Was very difficult to not be seen. If you somehow got past the gunmen, the dogs, the patrols, the guard tower, the spotlights, the electrified fence, and you got through that somehow, then you've got to go through this little, well, not little, it's very deep, actually, trench they built here. It has water in it, and it's fairly easy to go down into, but it goes very steeply down to kind of a point right here. It's very difficult to climb back out again on the other side, but that would at least slow you down, and they could, if someone got this far, they could easily shoot them here along this part of the wall, or this part of the embankment of this ditch. It was all concrete. Then if somehow you got through that, then you come to this area here, and this area is full of landmines. So if you made it through this, and this, and you climbed up this little embankment and you started making a run for the actual Berlin Wall, you're taking a big risk, a very big risk that you would be blowing up, blowing off a leg or two on your way to freedom. Well, and of course, you're not going to go anywhere then. I don't know that anyone made it this far, but if they did, they'd have to deal with that when they got to this big wide area, this big kind of strip here. This whole area is kind of called no man's land, but that's a common phrase. And let's say you made it to the landmines. Well, now you got a 13-foot wall to deal with no real way to scale up over it. So this is what I mean when I say that the wall itself was a deterrent from people escaping, but so was this whole system here. This ran the length of the city, and in various forms, as I've said, but this was kind of the final, as I say, this is moderne Grenze, we said moderne Geschichte, first slide. This is modern border. Well, I hope this is not a modern border, but here you go. This is what you would have faced if you tried to escape just by making a run for the wall. Yeah, this is not the way most people escape. People got creative, and people dug tunnels and all kinds of things. But that's a whole set of stories for some other time. Now, if you're looking you can see the west side of the wall. It's got graffiti on it. And this is up on a kind of elevated platform in the west looking over. And you can see part of this no man's land area. There are apartments fairly close here to but this actually has a fence, and then it actually has another type of barrier here. So I guess you wouldn't have to see all of this. You would still see the guard tower though. But it would be, and there's part of this lighting structure that was there that kept the whole thing illuminated. These big towers right here at nighttime. Good. So the wall ran the length of the city, but it actually used those rivers I mentioned to actually form the border. So it was kind of a natural border that was set up when the occupied powers took over. So the wall itself, this actually is the west side of Berlin. This is the east side of Berlin over here. And it would have been, this is kind of, they had it kind of in these areas where there's an intersection or a bridge. They would have backed up the border up to here, and all kinds of checkpoints and everything coming and going, and not be easy to do. The wall actually, or this no man's land area, got wider as it came through this area known as, up here, Potsdamer Platz, Potsdam Square, and cuts right through a little bit through this little park area, but then comes into this. Now this is today though. This is all this modern structures that are built today, but this was just kind of an open field, and I'll show you here a picture. That's not the best, but this actually is something interesting too. Along the route, there were three Allied checkpoints. There was Allied checkpoint Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, ABC. And so checkpoint Charlie was the U.S. Sector's checkpoint. And this is looking from the west to the east on kind of a ugly looking gray, snowy, slushy day. This sign here says in 4 different languages, you are now leaving the American sector. It says it in German, English, French, and Russian. And you can see that there's a guard in here. This actually is a U.S. Marine sitting inside this booth here, but there's another guard posted on the front side of this guard shack here. And somewhat ceremonial. They wouldn't know, I don't know what one person could do, but they were there. And there was a Soviet guard on the other side over here, or an East German guard facing back towards the west, facing back this way. But you can see here that people would have gone. Now, here's the thing. People from the west could go to the east for 24 hours. You could get a passport visa, and you could go visit the east for 24 hours, but no more than that. You had to come back out within 24 hours, or they came in looking for you then. The East Germans would. You probably didn't want that to happen. So there you see some cars going from west to east. Well, after this is how they loosened up a little bit. If people had family or had some reason to be in the east, you could go. You could get kind of a tourist visa. That's what I did back in the 80s. I went to East Berlin from West Berlin, and it's just kind of a hassle. But once you get there, then it's interesting to look around and see how things were there in the East. But you had to exchange a certain amount of money on the border, and you had to answer a lot of questions, and had to subject to them going through all your belongings. If you had a backpack or something, they're gonna open that up and see everything you got. And and of course they were interested in me and my friend because we both spoke German, and that looked suspicious to them. So this is where all this Cold War stuff was going on. This looks like I said, a pretty cold day there in Berlin. Here's some other pictures of Checkpoint Charlie at different times in history. And here's what it looks like today. That sign they've kind of refurbished it. The sign is still standing. You're leaving the American sector. Then it's written in Russian, then in French, and then in German. And then there's this sign here that looks like a sign, but on this side is a picture of an East German guard facing towards the west. And on the other side of the sign, I didn't get a good picture of it, but is a U.S. Marine looking to the east. So I mentioned that these people kind of literally faced off here in Berlin, where east met west. And so this is kind of a visual memorial of the fact that this is literally where the Cold War came to a head, right where it was. If things would have blown up, it probably would have been right here. So for all those years from 61 to 89, there were literally military people facing off with one another all the time. Well, the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. That's what Mauerfall, fall of the wall. And these people, with some help, with some ladders and whatever else, were actually climbing on top of the wall when it came down. It's sometime, if you take German in the high school, I'll explain. It's not really a complicated story. It's just a bit of a long story of how this all happened exactly. It happened all kind of with some things leading up to it, but the wall itself really came down in a single night because of some errors that were made in East Germany. And people began chipping away at the wall with hammers and chisels, and this may have been a day or two later, may not have been the actual day the wall came down. People had parties and all on top of the wall, and it was really okay. You can see them here. They've chipped away at the wall, and they're able to stand on top of part of it. This is the Brandenburg Gate. You can see it was in pretty bad repair. The East Germans didn't do much after the war to keep it looking nice. It's been refurbished, as I showed you in that first, or renovated, as I showed you in that first picture. These people over here are on the west side of the wall, and they're, trying to climb on top of the wall. So the wall then was systematically taken down, not people chipping it, but actually with machines and bulldozers. They came in and began to take down the wall piece by piece. You can see they've taken off this tube part here, and they begin then pulling down these actually were in sections, and There you go. There's a little people selling. East Germany's really fallen, and here's one of the old guard towers back here. You can see how people chipped away at the wall trying to get little pieces of it to sell when they did later. But people were selling their old East German uniforms and all kinds of medals they won in the military and other kind of memorabilia, Cold War stuff. People are buying these things here. And I remember in the early 90s in Berlin, there was just um, these tables set up everywhere, especially close to where the Berlin Wall was, trying to sell little things to buy. Then there were these big chunks of the wall that were taken out, and people just kind of freely were able to walk back and forth. This is taken on the west side of the wall. This tower over here and these buildings are on the east side of the wall. And so people are, at this point, there's a big section taken out, and people are just moving freely back and forth from east to west as things loosened up. There's actually today still an outdoor museum, or that's what I would call it, I guess, a open air museum. And they left a section of the wall up here so you could see what it looked like. Although you can see it's also been chipped away at. People don't do that anymore. But when it was still there and the wall was up, when it was coming down, I should say, they were, yeah. But they decided to keep a section of the wall up as a memorial and as a way for people to see what the wall looked like. Then they took another section of the wall that's still standing, and they divided it up into sections. They invited artists from around the world to come and paint something to do with freedom, with peace, with these changes that are going on in Europe and around the world. And this became a very successful event. And then they decided to leave all these paintings up, and now they call it the East Side Gallery. And it's actually a long stretch of the wall they left up, and it's actually kind of cool to walk down the street here and see each section of the wall. And each artist again had like about a 12-foot wide area. Of course, it's as tall as it's tall. And this is kind of cool. This car driving through the wall. This is an old East German car they're portraying, and they're almost kind of three-dimensional looking the way it's going through there. And then today, of course, most all of it's not standing at all. And throughout the city are these little bronze plaques, and they're at the ground level. They're inlaid into the ground, and it tells you where the Berlin Wall stood in 1961, 1989. And people don't even look at these. They just walk back and forth other than like nothing ever happened. So it's been, since 89, it's been quite some time, right? 31 years. So young people today who are in high school, and a lot of them who are in college, really don't have any, most college and high school students, well, all high school students, have no memory of Germany or Berlin being divided. They only know Germany as a united country. So yeah, it's the way memorials go. People kind of forget about things after a while, maybe. I showed you a picture earlier. This is actually an old church, the Kaiser Wilhelm Church. It was bombed during the war, and this big spire here was completely destroyed, and so was the back end of the church. So it's all that stands today is part of this spire up to about right here, and the front part of the church stands today. I'll show you. It still stands in Berlin. There's the old church, and here's the new one. It's left as a memorial, not to the Nazis or not to Germany, but as a reminder type memorial of what happens during a war. Yeah, churches get bombed, neighborhoods get bombed, and they left it just the way it was. It's just you can see it's kind of jagged here on the top. Again, another picture here. Yeah, it's all jagged here on the top. Left it just the way it was, so people can be reminded of what happens when there's a war. They actually built a new church back over here, a very modern church. The bell tower is on the other side of the old church. You see it's built the same. This is kind of glass bricks. They're actually very dark blue, and it gives this kind of effect on the inside. I'll show you like this, and it's kind of cool. Of course, it has lights on the inside too, but it's a Lutheran church there built on the spot of the old church. The old church is now just a memorial. There's an original picture, this after it was built for some time, of the Reichstag. in 1900. You can see there's this glass dome on top, and the building looks about what it looks like today, pretty much. There it was again after the war. I showed you that picture already. And then here it is today. And it's just the same. In fact, they even put a new glass dome on top of the Reichstag, and people visit the Reichstag and see a line of people over here. It's very complicated over here now. This is a little bit older picture. Now there's all kinds of security things over here, and you've got to go through a whole gauntlet of questions. And so to visit the Reichstag is not that easy, but I think thousands of people visit it every day, school groups, and I've taken students there, and yeah, they really, of course, but like I'm sure it's like visiting the White House or a lot of other government buildings today. You got to go through metal detectors, and they want to see your identification, and yeah, so the German flag there is flying, and you can see again part of this glass dome on top of the Reichstag. Another angle here, a little bit more of the glass dome, and it's the same building really, just been fixed up on the outside. And there's the Spree River here, as I mentioned, and here's that glass dome. You can go right to the top. There's an elevator. You can go right to the top. You come out of the elevator in this little building over here on top of the Reichstag. It's flat, and there's this dome. Now, the dome is bigger than it looks here. I'll show you a better picture because, yeah, these people are inside the glass dome here. Has this reflective, these mirrors that reflect downward. And there's an old student here. But this is, you can see inside. It's kind of deceptive. But if you look here, you can see people walking right there inside the dome. And there's some people up there. And there's some people over here. Well, they're walking on a spiral walkway that goes around the dome. It circles around. I think it makes maybe 3 rounds all the way to the top. And then you come back down, right on the spirals, back down to the ground level. So it kind of gives you an idea how big it is. If people are about 10 feet off the ground right there, and maybe 30 feet off the ground right here. And of course, you still have a lot longer ways to go to get to the top. But that's the dome. They rebuilt a glass dome as it was originally. Well, some old students of mine there. Yeah, good kids. Those 4 kids right there. Inside the glass dome. Good. This is where the parliament meets. It's not all of it. It's just a rather narrow picture. There's the seating here. The Speaker of the House and all that would sit up here, and it's a parliamentary style government. And so people sit along with their party, like we do pretty much in our Congress as well. Across the way from just across this yard here is in front of the Capitol building is the new Chancellor's residence. And this is where the Chancellor of Germany, if you know her name, it's a woman, Angela Merkel, and she's served now for 4 terms as Chancellor. And that means soon she'll be at the end of her 4th term, and she'll be, be 16 years that she's served as Chancellor of Germany. She still is right now. She's not going to run again, but this is her official residence here, although this is more of a residence to kind of receive visitors, and it's close to the capital to receive other people from other countries. She and her husband's a professor at the University of Berlin, a chemistry professor. They actually live in much closer to the university, not all too far from here. But they have an apartment, and they really pretty much live there. By all accounts, a very kind of humble life there in a, not a huge apartment at all. But this is their official residence here. Good. Here's some other pictures of Old Berlin. This is on Potsdamer Platz, this very famous traffic light. Up here on the top is a red, yellow, green light. And on all, there are 4 sides of this. There are these red, yellow, green lights that would tell these double-decker buses and streetcars and cars and pedestrians when they can go and come and go. Then Potsdamer Platz just got destroyed. It was a big shopping area and a big kind of economic center of the city, but it got destroyed, and they just tore it down and made it into this no man's land area. And here's the Berlin Wall running the length of the city. This is in the late 1960s. Notice how these are streetcar tracks, right? So we just saw the streetcars. here. These streetcars, this is a bus here, but these streetcars run on these electrical lines and on tracks in the ground. Well, when they divided the city, they didn't worry about any of that. They just built the wall where they built it, and these tracks just go right into the wall. They just disappear. You don't really see them even pick up on this side, really. Maybe a little bit, but yeah, the tracks just run right into the wall. Now, this is the new area. That's not an open field anymore. This is a very modern area they built. I'll come back to this right here. This kind of domed thing here is really kind of cool. But this is the headquarters for the German railway system. This is the Mercedes building. This is the Sony building over here. And there's lots of other offices and apartments built all around this area known as Potsdamer Platz. Here's the train station. Bahnhof, train station, Potsdamer Platz. It's all below ground though, so you go down below. But there's that building that's the train station, a train railway system, a railway company's headquarters, and you're kind of walking into that very modern area. Then from there, and there's that dome thing I'm talking about. It's actually made out of fabric here, and it stretches across. And I see here's where the Philharmonic plays. This is, of course, a big park area here. But there you go. There's the other buildings I was mentioning. There's actually a very nice hotel right here, Ritz-Carlton Hotel. And yeah, you just can walk right down the street here and go up underneath this covered area. And at nighttime, it lights up and changes colors, very vibrant colors, blue and purple and pink. And right there's actually a multi-level cinema, what do you call that? IMAX theater here. This actually looks like this was a promo for the movie Troy. It's a big Trojan horse they brought in underneath here. It's kind of hard to even imagine how big it is underneath. It's several stories of living and office space that face inward into that domed area. Here it is from a distance there. But if you look at this is kind of a cool picture here. And look, they built back that old, it's not actually directing traffic anymore, but they built back the old traffic light. It was kind of another iconic thing of the city and something that people knew about Berlin. And there it is, and they rebuilt Potsdamer Platz. They had to bring back the four-sided clock and the four-sided stop and go and caution lights. Good. I kind of like this area. You can see how big this area is. If you start to count stories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 12 stories high. This is a promo for Spider-Man, obviously. Spider-Man's climbing on the side of the IMAX theater here. But restaurants out here, cafes, there's a Starbucks over here. There's actually a film museum underneath here. This is all office and living space. You can have an apartment that's here. Looks like they're going to have some kind of a concert. They got lighting set up here. There's a nice big restaurant over here. There's the big hotel. Just everything you can imagine. It's kind of a cool place to congregate underneath this dome area. Here's one of the old train stations. Well, not old, it's still used today. Important station. And here is high-speed rail coming into the train station, the ICE train, Intercity Express. And they built a brand new train station in Berlin right next to the Capitol. So you can actually come off the train at the Capitol and you can walk to the Reichstag. This is when it was under construction. And here it is as it's completed. And it's very modern. It's a big shopping center inside here. They have a multi-level parking garage here in these lower levels, but above that, again, are more offices for the railway and for the station itself. Trains come into this kind of covered area. Again, lots of glass and steel, very modern construction. That's actually an architectural drawing from the inside looking out. And this is a real picture. Berlin. So we have the word Hauptstadt, capital city. This is called the Hauptbahnhof. That means it's the main train station. And these people are catching a local train here. We know the Olympics were held. I won't go into this too much. The Olympics were held in Germany in 1936. And then 90 years, oh no, not 90 years later. What would that be? 70 years later, the structure still stands. And it's actually the home field to the Major League Soccer team Berlin Hertha or Hertha Berlin. And then in 2006, Germany hosted the World Cup in Germany at various fields all over Germany, soccer stadiums all over Germany. But the final games and the championship game were actually played here in this stadium in 2006. And here's, still have the thing where the Olympic fire would have burned. That's still standing here. And you can see they've kind of covered over the seating area. But I think the whole stadium holds 85,000 people. They're just crazy about soccer, and they cram all these people in there. Good. I don't know who this is here, but he got in my picture, I guess. I don't know if it's even my picture. But this is the Berlin Cathedral. Again, another angle. Inside, very beautiful. Beautiful hotel here. I think that should be enough. We're running out of time. I'm going to stop there. And on later this week, we're going to talk about pronunciation and the alphabet. So we'll be back to speaking German again. But I hope you enjoyed learning a little history of Berlin, of the Hauptstadt, and a little extra things that I can share with you about the city and like things like this. Okay, so auf Wiedersehen, tschüss und bis zum nächsten Mal. Wir sehen uns, am Donnerstag, on Thursday, I think. Yeah. Okay, good. Auf Wiedersehen, Kinder.